Okay. Good afternoon. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to our annual In Celebration of Women Luncheon, kicking off Utica College celebration of the Women's Her Story Month. On behalf of the Women's Resource Center in Utica College, I would like to thank you for joining us to begin our celebration of National Women's History Month and continuing to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Women's Resource Center. We will get underway with a few brief remarks and will serve lunch shortly. I hope you have enjoyed the PowerPoint that has been running and will continue through the luncheon until our speaker begins. While it will be difficult to fully represent 20 years of the center's history, we hope this PowerPoint provides welcome glimpses of staff and the center over the years. I also would encourage you to purchase raffle tickets to win a variety of Women's Her Story Month gifts, which can be purchased at either registration table. The winner will be drawn at our Women's Resource Center Pub Night and Awards at the end of the month. An organization like the Women's Resource Center doesn't come to life or stay active and engaged without the input, energy, and support of students, faculty, staff, and the larger community. All of you here today have supported, challenged, and worked with us in a number of ways, and we appreciate how fortunate we are in having made and sustained those connections. Today, however, we particularly want to recognize those who are here with us in the room who were integral to the center's development in its early years and have continued to give generously over their time, energy, and resources to the center. Lisa Davis, Carol Downing, Polly Ginsberg, Marianne Jonda, Joellen Vespo, Carol McIntosh, Kathy Randall, Dieta Ziemba. If we have missed someone, please know that omission was not intentional and we appreciate all your contributions. We would also like to give a special thanks to our guest speaker, Dr. Traci Fordham, one of the co-founders of the Women's Resource Center 20 years ago, and we are looking forward to her remarks. Before moving on to briefly talk about plans for this month, I'd like to introduce our advisor, Elaine Varga, a few brief comments to make.
The center staff thought it was important to make sure, we so often don't recognize the folks who are integral in what we do and how we do it. And so for those who are here, who have been with us throughout the years, and many of you beyond that, thank you. And we wanted to make sure that we paid attention to that. So that, if anyone wanted to talk with you, get a glimpse of history, although I know you may not particularly thank me for saying that, you know who you are. I also want to thank Amy for the welcoming comments. Lisa's laughing. When we start being referred to as wise women, we know we're in trouble. So thank you, Amy, for the welcoming comments. It's very true that it would be difficult to continue to raise issues of gender and their implications for women without the support of our community. The support of our administration, faculty, and staff throughout the years has been invaluable. I want to thank, for example, President Todd Hutton and his wife, who come as often as they can whenever they're in town, as well as Dean Kelly, Dean Kirkpatrick, and the variety of folks who have really supported us over the years. We also didn't want to go much further, however, without acknowledging the contributions of some folks who can't be with us today. There were some who are actively involved in the center who have moved away and pursuing careers elsewhere. Claudia Bell, Dan Van Vechten, other advisors for the center, and other Women's Resource Center staff who remain part of our history. Some can't be with us for other reasons, like Kim Landon, Steve Paterini, and Paul Lehman, but they continue, as they have over the years, to support us whenever they can and how they can. I do want to make sure that we have two women in our memories, though, as we move forward. The first is Kate Oser, who we lost a few years ago, who I still remember sitting down front and center and would probably be saying right now, slow down and turn up the mic. So I want to make sure that we keep her in our memory. She would also be critiquing all of the written materials in front of you, but that's just part of who Kate was. I also want to make sure that we keep in our memory Della Ferguson, founder of the Midlife and Older Women's Center, one of the co-founders for the Women's Resource Center. We lost Della recently, but we know how integral to her life the Women's Resource Center and women's issues were, and that she would be here if she could. I want to let those here know that at the Board of Trustees meeting this weekend, the Board of Trustees voted to rename the center the K. Della Ferguson Women's Resource Center in honor of her contributions throughout the years. So keep your eye out for continuing information about a more formal ceremony to come. I generally am not speaking at these events. I'd rather you talk to the Women's Resource Center staff, who are the folks who are integrally involved in what we do. So I'm going to turn this over to them. I'd also like you to be able to enjoy the terrific lunch that Sodexo staff has prepared, as well as Traci's remarks. So with that, let me turn this over to Margarita Cuevas Cruz, I've got all those names right, to talk about the theme for the month.
Good afternoon. The theme this year is Our History is Our Strength. Very self-explanatory. But today we are here to celebrate our history because it is our strength. On this last day of February, we welcome March, which is celebrated as National Women's History Month in thousands of schools, communities, and workplaces across the nation. Our history is our strength pays tribute to the millions of women who helped create a better world for the times in which they lived, as well as future generations. Our shared history unites families, communities, and nations. Although women's history is intertwined with the history shared with men, women have created a unique sphere of women's history due to social, religious, economic, and biological factors. There was once a time when women's history was, overlooked and undervalued. Women's achievements were rarely recognized, but by knowing and listening to women's stories, we are part of a movement that strengthens our history today. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ruby Gonzales, intern for the Women's Resource Center. I'm just going to be talking about the several events that are going to be upcoming this March. So March 2nd, we have a Global Security, One Woman's Perspective, an event with Dina Temple Ransom. March 3rd, we have a Don't Let Us Fall forum speaking about domestic violence, breast cancer, HIV, and AIDS. March 7th, we have a Staying Out of the Social Confrontations Danger Zone, being transgender and everyday life. March 8th, we have a Women in Islam, International Women's Day. March 24th, we have a Love Your Body. April 1st, we have a Women's Health, Beauty, and Bazaar. April 2nd, we have a trip to Seneca Falls, which is going to be viewing historical sites and things of that nature. So look forward to it. Thank you.
You have a listing at your seat of all the events coming up that we know about. There are groups across campus that are planning other events, and I would urge you to look out for those events as well. And there are some things coming up in April so that you can keep an eye out for. With that, however, I'm going to now turn this over to Sodexo. You will hear the musical stylings of Michael Bone, who will be playing the piano for us. Michael is a very talented pianist and heard that we were doing a luncheon and wanted to come and provide us with some music for the lunch. So I wanted to make sure that you know who that was coming from. There are a couple of cards on each table in case you wanted to know where this talented young man was from. So enjoy your lunch with Sodexo, and we will be back shortly after 1 for Traci to begin her remarks. Thanks again. And before we continue much further, I do want to say thank you to Sodexo for a really marvelous meal and a beautiful presentation. So thank you to them. I'm going to bring Jamie Evanov up now to formally introduce our speaker, for those who need introduction.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jamie Evanov, and I'm a programming intern here at the Women's Resource Center. And today it is my pleasure to introduce our honorary speaker, Traci Fordham. Traci Fordham is an associate professor of communication studies in the Department of Performance and Communication Arts and the coordinator of the Gender and Sexuality Studies program at St. Lawrence University. She teaches courses in interpersonal communication, gender and sexuality, small group communication, rhetoric and popular culture, and intercultural communication. Dr. Fordham's research includes dialogue and critical pedagogy, discourses of mixed raciality, and travel and cross-cultural adaptations. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Dr. Fordham.
This is just wild. This is wild. I have my Love Kills Slowly folder here. Okay, I've been crying a lot, and it's and so one shouldn't apologize before one actually begins a speech, but in some ways I am going to apologize because I may break up a little bit. It's so good to be back here, but you know what? These are transition lenses. That's what they call them now, right? I can see you, Lisa. Okay.
Kind of hard to know.
It's hold on, we'll wait for the music.
That's a nice introduction.
Yeah, I know, it's lovely. It's some more musical stylings. Okay, now that we're here, everybody got their cell phones? Everybody check them. I know you're going to check them. Yes. All right, let's go. It's okay. Let's see. It's just like class. It is, really, isn't it? Okay, obviously it's really, really great to be back here, where so many things began and are still beginning. For you students, I'd like to begin with a note of thanks, particularly for the students, because you are engaged enough in your learning to commit yourselves to an enterprise like the Women's Resource Center and to coursework in gender studies. This kind of commitment is the foundation of a plural democracy. Thanks to my girl, and that's with 2 R's and an L, Elaine Varga, for inviting me back here and for always being on the cutting edge. Yeah, let's give her, please give the woman a hand. And thank you to my colleagues and faculty and staff at at Utica College, because what you do every day is this very precious work of helping young people to become more engaged and thoughtful humans. And that's what I'm going to mean today by everyday activism. It's thought and praxis, working in small and sometimes big ways to help make the worlds we live much more humane and just. Before I begin, I'd like to send some waves. I don't really need this mic. Okay, I'd like to send some waves of gratitude out. We've done it a little bit, but I'd like to send some more out to Della Ferguson, because for so many of us, she was and continues to be an icon of gender justice. Quiet, unassuming, strong, but really uncompromising in her convictions and just in what she stood for. She guided and mentored so many of us, students, faculty, staff, members of the Utica community at large. And the tendrils of her influence and compassion stretched around the planet. Some of you were with us. She led a group of American feminist scholars to Beijing in 1990, and we were the first American delegation to be there after the Tiananmen Square protests and massacre. And I couldn't help think of Della and our interactions with Chinese women during the recent protests and promising changes in Egypt. So one more time, here's to Della. Della. In 1987, when I first came to Utica College, I guess that's in the day. Is that what, because they keep trying to get people to operationalize what in the day means. So I guess that's in the day. So in the day, when I first came to Utica College to teach in communication arts, I was 24 years old. Many of the people who are teaching, guiding, and working with students here at UC are the same people who became my dear friends and colleagues. And this place was my home. It was my physical home, but also my emotional, intellectual, and political home. And so much of what I'll talk about today will play with this notion of home, of memory, of gratitude, and of what we do with the past, not that it's singular or static. So here's a memory story. A long time ago, a number of badass women would regularly congregate in the bowels of Hubbard Hall. That really wasn't a pun, but I guess it sort of ended up being one, sorry. And it was at the time Della Ferguson's office. I walked past it. You remember the little tiny room? It was all smoky. It was the late 1980s. Our hair was really big, wasn't it? And our clothes were glittery, and we were listening to Madonna and Cyndi Lauper. You know we were. You know we were. Oh, Lord. But we were also talking about social justice. And I had managed to get through an entire relatively prestigious master's program in communication without ever talking substantively about gender and inequality. At that point in my academic career, gender was merely a unit in an overall canon. Unit 15, men talk like this, women talk like this. Or gender and communication were relegated to a topics course, which I actually taught here once. But gender wasn't really a necessary foundation to all examinations of social interaction. At the time, the interplanetary metaphor had not yet been ingrained in the American popular imaginary, but it amounted to the same thing. Men and women were entrenched categories, and they were naturally from different planets. They were opposites. We weren't academically trained to question the binary. I hadn't been taught to study patriarchy. I was not given opportunities to intellectually grapple with misogyny, homophobia, white supremacy, or compulsory heterosexuality. While I was demographically sitting on the cusp between the second wave and postmodern feminist third wave, I hadn't had opportunities to deeply engage with social inequality. And it was in these political and philosophical conversations that I had here with these really incredible women and with some awesome enlightened men, in getting to know people who had been living, teaching, and working in these issues, my worldview and world were shaken up. And we were shaking one another up. Yeah, we were. And it was in these conversations that the Women's Resource Center, and that is intentionally with the Y and happily so, that the Gender Studies program and the Women's Resource Center, again, were conceived. And it was because of these conversations and these relationships that I took my own pre-radical feminist activist self to do doctoral studies at the Maxwell School in Syracuse, which also included a program in women's studies and a concentration in Middle East studies. And really, that's how personal and social change happen. That's how democracy and social justice happen. At the very core, change happens in thoughtful dialogue with others and in changing how we as individuals think about and act in the world. It's about language. It's about critical consciousness. It's about rhetoric. It's about relation. And I'm just going to say it. It's about love and compassion. And parenthetically, of course, these are not new ideas. They go back thousands of years, and as recently as this morning, from Buddha to Quintilian to Gandhi to Audre Lorde to grassroots efforts in Wisconsin that have become Save the American Dream. My students at St. Lawrence often become frustrated as they learn more and more about gender, sexuality, race, and other social inequalities. It's daunting, isn't it? It's daunting. What are the consequences of learning this stuff? Now that I know that gender is like socially constructed and performative and wrapped up in interlocking systems of inequality, how do I live in this world? Must I hate men? Do I not let my kids watch anything produced by the Disney Corporation? I would say yes, but these are the questions. I love lipstick. Patriarchy, misogyny, white supremacy, environmental degradation, hyper-consumerism. It's all just so really huge. And we can't dismantle it alone. How do we do justice in our everyday lives? So learning about, and this is mostly for you students here, unlearning about, learning about and unlearning about gender and sexualities in college and in a scholarly and co-curricular context should necessitate the question about what to do with this newly formed critical consciousness, right? No point in cracking your brain if you're not going to put it to good use, right? So doing social justice work has to begin with your own head and then manifest in whatever social enterprises you participate in. thinking differently about gender, talking differently, or talking back about gender and as gendered people, hearing, reading, watching differently, or not at all, are forms of social activism and are part of the practice of social justice. Like democracy, social justice is not a noun. It is not a person, place, or thing. It must happen anew in people's thinking, in their everyday interactions, and in the worlds they create with one another. And all this raises a question for me, one that the American Association of Colleges and Universities has been asking for a few years now. How do we teach students about personal and social responsibility? Do we? Must we? Are you simply learning disciplinary knowledge and skill sets when you're in college, or are you, should you be, learning how to become more thoughtful citizens in a plural democracy, in a globalizing world? So, that's a big question. And one of my answers is that, friendship can do some justice. Beverly Tatum, a critical race scholar and educator, author of, among other things, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Cafeteria, suggests that instead of thinking of racism as an identity category, i.e. she's a racist, it's more useful to think of these isms, these inequalities like sexism or heterocentrism, as communicative practices. We aren't sexist or homophobic. We do and say stuff that creates and reifies these ways of thinking. So I've been asking my students to think about friendship as gender justice work, as a kind of everyday activism. And many of you know how perilous that terrain is, right? You know. One of the many complexities of learning about sex and gender is that your friends may not be. So, you are somewhat forced into a pedagogical position of teaching your friends about your new worldview. And a worldview is not something that you can leave in your notebook or in the classroom. You become a different human as you learn about humanity. Yeah, and it can be very painful, can't it? Okay, we can have an amen here. So when you realize that some of the people with whom you hang are not thinking in the ways you are thinking, that can be pretty daunting. But it's a loving and committed sort of activism, I think, to let your friendships be a context for gender justice. Everyday activism might also include your social life. No, not my social life. Not my parties. You're hearing me, right? No. Isn't there any place where I can just have fun? Really? Yeah, no. No. Not if your fun and amusement is predicated upon the perpetuation of inequality and tired stereotypes and pain. I just had a sit down with a student group at St. Lawrence University who threw a white trash party. Yeah, that's deep. In the poorest county in New York State, second poorest in the nation. It depends on the year. So where in the North Country, the material realities of most of the population are just absolutely grim. Young women came costumed to this party with faux black eyes, blackened out teeth, pregnant, as if poverty and domestic abuse are themes around which privileged white kids can have some fun. Students from our Women's Resource Center boycotted the party and created programs for talking back. That's everyday activism. So another question. How often does the brutal raping and murdering of a woman have to be the central trope in popular film so that the other tired trope of the violent male avenger can function? Just a question that I have. So how many bloody, eviscerated bodies of women have to be paraded in front of us in the guise of popular entertainment? But I like CSI. Why does this stuff make sense to us? Why aren't people standing up in the middle of a movie and screaming, "Stop this madness, I can't take it any longer"? Why are films that narrate love and peaceful resolution to conflict usually demeaned as a chick flick? Asking these questions, having these conversations with your friends and significant others, this can be a form of everyday activism. One more memory. By the way, Elaine referred to me as one of the old timers. You know, it just kind of cracks me up a little bit. So indulge in old timer, a bit more nostalgia. When I first arrived at UC, I had the great good fortune to become friends with women who were raising and or working with children. Carol, Marianne, woohoo! Okay, give a little holler out to you guys. And Polly too. They would often refer to what they did, to the socializing of their babies, as critical feminist work. Rhetoricians and literary theorists can be so hyperbolic, really. You know, I did. I just really assumed that they were exaggerating. Connor. But as is often the case, when it comes to raising children, one does not really understand the mind-bending complexity of the endeavor until one is immersed in it. I remember being awed at how open and enlightened Connor and Maisie, you can raise your hands, come on, give a shout out to Connor, Maisie, and Marlena were. Okay, I'm going to start your questions. But I remember how anxious and fearful I ultimately was when I learned that I was going to give birth to a person with a penis. Now that's daunting, isn't it? Oh my goodness. And that's where sex and gender activism become a pretty salient notion, right? I learned from other mothers, several of whom are in this room, about how to raise a thoughtful, sensitive, open, anti-misogynist kid in a society that often doesn't take very kindly to queer masculinities. But that's the most amazing sort of everyday activism, isn't it? Raising kids who, as a matter of course, just in being in the world, resist gender inequality. It's one of the most difficult things to wrap your head around. There is no ideology-free zone. Everything we do, think, read about, eat, practice, desire, is caught up in these matrices of meaning around sex, gender, race, capital. So living is a political project. And it is really, really big. But it doesn't have to be daunting. It doesn't have to paralyze you. Every day, every moment, we can do and say things that might change someone's mind, that might alter events, that might even change the world. And it happened for me here. So, happy Women's with a Y Herstory Month, and happy 20th anniversary Women's Resource Center. And thank you for having me back, folks. She's finally gotten to eat.
Okay. So Traci said when she was talking about her speech, well, what would anybody ask? Why would anybody ask me a question? However, I did say there will be time if anybody wants to make comments, raise questions, have a conversation with Traci or with each other. So I want to open up that time for you now.
Remember back in the day when the Women's Resource Center was first starting, we had a certain amount of resistance. And part of the resistance in the community was expressed this way: Women's Center? Why shouldn't there be a men's center too? You remember that?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And do you remember how we responded to that?
Did everybody get the question? Okay, so, and there's still, I imagine that there's still a lot of that today.
That never ends.
It doesn't end. And okay, so there are two, I think there are two issues, right? There's one, when we first in the day started this, hi Tony, when we first started this, there was, you know, why not a men's center, right? And of course our response was, the world is a men's center. And we proceeded. But then at the same time, you know, you have to, it's really important to take what Bell Hooks says into account, that at a certain point, men have to be comrades in struggle. Okay? I mean, she's referring specifically to black men being in a black feminist struggle, but the point remains that, you know, where are the men allies in the Women's Resource Center, right? Right now. I mean, where are they? Who are they? And why aren't they there? Okay? Are they afraid? You know what? It's such a scary place, you know, all of these women in one place, you know. I mean, it's horrifying. But and so but this is actually the same, you know, really the same thing that Beverly Tatum suggests in Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? You know, at a certain point, those who suffer from inequality, who are on the margins of dominant culture and society, you know, at a certain point, have to get together to make some things happen. So, yeah, I remember it well.
What do you tell students or others who say or believe that we're living in a post-racial, post-gender society?
Yeah, we'll tell that to people who make, you know, 51 cents to every dollar, or what, it's up to 70 cents now, right? Is 75, you know, right? It's, you know, and that doesn't mean, you know, right? I mean, but it's a difficult argument, right? Because, you know, the argument, well, so much has changed since I was a kid, you know, and it's like, well, that's very true. And, you know, so it's acknowledging change, it's acknowledging progress, while still at the same time, you know, and I think the issue too also has to do with this notion of, you know, when we talk about diversity, we often function on, we often sort of land on that which is diverse, okay? So rather than what makes difference different from what? And so we don't, you know, I intentionally talk about white supremacy because that's the power, right? That's the privilege, that's that which is, you know, others are rendered different. And until, you know, so, you know, gender equality, gender justice, racial justice, this is really all about sort of naming the privilege. And it's, as long as it's still there, then we all have work to do. Does that make any sense? It's kind of rhetorically convoluted. I'm sorry. I get tripped up in language. It's a problem.
What do you think about women trying to jump into men's organizations? They were strictly women's groups and men's groups.
Like the Rotary.
Like the Rotary.
Yeah, sorry. Any Rotarians here? I've actually done a lot of research on the Rotary for a variety of reasons. But I think, oh, is that your recording? It sounds like a canned baseball game applause. Like, yay! It's like, wow. Yay! We should do that. I think organizations for people who live in marginalized groups in any society are really important, and it's a way of maintaining and preserving a sense of identity and political practice. At the same time, groups that exist to perpetuate the majority, you know, I think it's really important that they open up. Does that make sense? And so, you know, in a world that, you know, in a culture that is male-dominated, middle, you know, upper middle class, even if we just look at all the social class and race and gender, in a world where that privilege drives the bus, as it were, having one more organization to perpetuate that seems, you know, highly problematic. So does that make sense? So yeah, so while Zonta should remain Zonta, Rotary needs to open up a little bit. And was it the Canton Club? no, there's a Canton, there was a Canton Club, but wasn't there a, what's the big organization in Utica? Fort Schuyler Club, yes. Yeah, yeah.
Anybody can go there now. I've been there.
Oh, they even let Mary Ann in, so it's good. They're good to go. It's good to go.
They let you in the front door.
Yeah, I used the front door.
Yeah, I remember going there with. It was probably Helmut Echterman. Who knows? But I had to go on the side. I had to go in the side door. I had to go in the side door. Yeah. In the day. In the day.
You know, when that was formed, across the street was the New Century Club. And the women were supposed to go there, and the men across the street to the Fort Schuyler Club. And that goes way, way back. That's how they kept themselves.
Were you as hooked up as you could be in the women's only club?
The women's only club was across the street called the New Century Club.
Right. Was it beautiful and oak paneled and you had all?
No.
That's what I'm saying. Like, were men clamoring to get into your club? Yeah.
They finally had to sell it because they couldn't afford to buy the boiler.
Right. It was a dirt floor. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, but really, at a certain point, it's like, you know, separate but equal is never really equal. Right. Right.
I was quite surprised to learn that the Daughters of the American Revolution also had the Sons of the American Revolution.
Huh.
On the other side, how often do you hear of the sons? Whereas the Daughters of the American Revolution, that's always, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that either until I attended a history program on Monday night. And there is a sun, so there is a shiny light. It's not always, we don't always get the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's, that, yeah, does the AAUW now accept men? Yeah, and here, so much of this stuff continues to crack my brain. I've been doing this for a really long time, and it is still sort of vexing. The notion of equality doesn't necessarily mean sameness, right? But I guess for me, here's the thing: until we accept different kinds of masculinities in our culture. Okay, until we are perfectly fine with queer masculinities, with more feminine masculinities, and so gender equality has meant up to this point that women can do stuff that men can do, and while that's fabulous, the converse is not. This is still not the case. Okay, we as a culture. We still have major problems with men not performing manliness or masculinity in particular kinds of ways. And so when being masculine or feminine and understanding the fluidity and frankly the arbitrariness of those categories becomes, I think, more open and accepting, then we know we're getting someplace. Then we know we're getting someplace. And where we are now, it's like, I can swear like a truck driver, and sometimes that's okay. But my son and many other men in my sphere of influence have much more, kind of prohibitions on their behavior and their ways of being in the world.
You said something about our history. No. Something you said sparked in me the theme, which is our history is our strength. But if there are no changes, if society doesn't see those changes in manliness, in masculinity, and a woman's role is supposed to be, even though we can do everything that they can do, but better or somewhat, that's what it says.
I like the backwards, in high heels.
Like even though that is said, I feel like in some ways, even though our history is our strength, because we can look back and try and make everything better, it is also our weakness. Because when those children are born, when young people like me are born, we are raised different. And I'm not saying due to being a woman or being a man, but also race does play a lot into it. Economic standing plays a lot into it. So it's like, what can you really say? Like, what progress can you really look forward to if when you look back into history, you see that some of its history repeats itself in what you teach in children? So it's like, how can you get out of that? How can you strengthen yourself?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. Did everybody hear? Sort of, you know, sometimes looking back, you realize, well, I mean, this is where nostalgia comes in. Okay, so I was walking around, you know, how sad that Hubbard Hall becomes sort of this place of total nostalgia. I'm standing in front of the classrooms going, it even smells the same here. Oh, I remember that room. Okay, you know, so sometimes looking back is always really important. Okay, and yeah, but it's never either or, and I think that's, you know, I mean, part of it is linguistic, part of it is ideological, but some of it is also, you know, I mean, think about this, you know, it's black, white, male, female, you know, these binaries were kind of entrenched by them, and so it does, you know, I think it's important to think more dialectically, I guess, you know, where it's yes and. So looking back in history, you can see certainly. That some things have, you know, patriarchy is a pretty, you know, persistent structure. But at the same time, they're just, I mean, just think about it, that, you know, that some of you, you know, actually, you may talk about transgender stuff in your classes, or you may be thinking about issues that would never have been thought about before. And so you have to look back with openness, but it's, you know, sometimes it's painful, but there's always progress.
When I was, this past summer, I was an orientation mentor, and they were teaching us how to deal with the students that were coming in. I thought it was pretty funny because they said that we are part of a generation who likes to be connected, who likes answers, who likes to always know what is going on. So phones, text messaging, we like to know what time it is, where we have to go, you know? But I think the problem with, I lost my thought, wow.
Connection, being connected.
Huh?
Connectedness. Such a mom. Orientation leader.
No, where I was going with it.
You were orienting somebody new.
Okay, where I was going with it was the fact that we like to know things, the fact that oh my God, it was such a good point.
Okay, well, come back to it. Come back to it. It's fleeting, isn't it? I know.
You've been away from, apparently you were here at Utica College 20 years ago, you said.
Yeah.
You probably know that our city has become very diversified. There's 35 languages being spoken at Proctor High School.
I saw this as a Bank of Utica commercial last night.
Right. I'm a realtor, and a lot of the groups that have come in, we're talking about racism and accepting everybody, but people still, the Bosnians stay with the Bosnians, the blacks stay with the blacks, the Cambodians stay with the Cambodians. We still are not intermingling with them socially. Okay, I belong to a lot of organizations, and we do have a few members of the black community who belong, but not too many. I mean, we don't invite each other to our functions, or we choose not to attend, or they choose not to attend ours maybe, I don't know. Will that ever change?
Well, I think it already is, but it's incremental. But yeah, this is where everybody goes, ooh, ooh. It's going to get deep. Yeah, because what happens, and this is why I think it's really important to talk about white supremacy rather than, you know, racism or even diversity, because what tends to happen is, and again, you know, inviting to come into a club. I mean, I'm going to use that metaphorically. It's a lot more difficult to come into a club that sets the standard, right, than it is to go into a club where, you know, you can if you want, if that makes any sense. And so, you know, and the pressure of assimilation is always there, right? I mean, assimilation is the process of sort of turning yourself over to a dominant group. And so the discourse of assimilation, I think, still guides the whole thing. It's like, you are welcome to join this club and you can become just like us. Because the reality is that white upper middle class men and women haven't, you know, it's not like, you know, we'd ever have to change that. And so, sorry, I didn't know if I was, so part of it is, you know, how do you recognize the necessity of maintaining cultural identities, whatever aspect they are, while at the same time, you know, learning from one another? And I think that traditionally in American society, the invitation has been for marginalized groups to learn, you know, to learn from the dominant groups rather than vice versa. If that makes that.
And Traci wondered what she was going to talk about. I am coming to say the part of the act, and not the hook because there's anything problematic, but I know that we've got a schedule. Part of activism is continuing the conversation. So if you had questions that you had left unanswered or conversations you want to have with each other, I would encourage you to do that. Traci's going to be here for a little while longer as well if you would like to pick her brain. But I would like to thank you for thought-provoking comments. And if Margarita remembers what she's going to say, she's going to share that with us. Do you remember what it was? Okay, can you do that real quick?
Okay, what I was saying was, in orientation, I was told that we, I feel rushed. Okay,
it's okay. Take your time and breathe.
My generation likes to be informed and likes to put everything in categories. And that's where I was going with it, like, because you were speaking about categories before, and I was going to ask about the differences between maybe your generation and my generation, and how much we put into maybe being activists, and do we have like the same like
agenda?
Yeah, it's not the same agenda because it's different times and we know that. So it's not the same agenda, but how can we work together to try and have a common agenda to get everyone still back on track, racially, as a woman and men, everyone together. But that's where I was going. I rushed it. So.
Well, no, you're doing fine. We're going to do a wrap-up comment in a minute, but that's a great place to end. So, Traci, you want to respond to that?
Oh, but it has to be a punctuation. Well, this is where herstory is our strength, right? Is that, I think part of what there has to be a give and take. Those of us who did activist work and who might think of the kind of work that we do in different ways. And so this is why some of us here, it's like, I'm totally down with Facebook. I mean, you folks are what's the term, digital natives, right? So that your heads have been formed in these particular technologies, and you've learned to communicate differently and develop relationships differently. And I mean, just the election of Barack Obama was so much about the internet, and so we all can and have to learn from one another, because we do all have. If in fact we're defining the work that we all have in front of us as justice work, then we all should be in it together. But men and women, right? And while this is Women's Herstory Month, it's really about the multiple ways that we exist in the world, and we all have to acknowledge that. And so I think we have a lot to learn from history, but we also have a lot to learn from the future.
So, with that punctuation mark, which sounds more like a dash than a period, could we thank Traci for her remarks? We have someone who's going to come from the center to do a formal thank you, but two things I wanted to note. The first is that we're fortunate enough to have folks here from HCCC who also have a tremendous calendar of events that they're doing with their Women's Resource Center or their Women's Club. And what that brings to mind is that there are wonderful things happening out in the community. So please search those out, take yourself to them, invite folks into what you're doing. And so I want to make sure that you had that note, know that it's out there, and to keep an eye out and take a look for that. The second is that for those who would like to be, as you'll notice, we have a PowerPoint up and I take pictures all the time. And so any of those who are either old-timers, self-identified, or anyone who would want to be part of an intergenerational picture, I would love to take a picture of folks who are here just so that we have that in one place before you head out and before everybody goes their separate ways. So I'd invite you to stay just for a minute or two after we're formally done to be able to have that picture taken. And with that, Alexandra, where are you? Come on, let's go and do some formal thank yous for us.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Marquis, and I'm one of the assistant programming people. And I would like to thank you all for coming out today, and a special thanks to Dr. Traci Fordham and Michael Boone, if I'm saying it right, and the Copy Center, the Facilities Management, Sodexo Dining Services, and Student Senate. And to win Women History gifts, their raffle tickets can be purchased at either table toward the exits. And thank you.
So with that, our formal part of our luncheon comes to an end. Those willing to stick around for a picture, please do so. We're going to put on some Queen Latifah for your listening entertainment as you walk away. And please feel free to hang out and continue to have the conversation. You're welcome to do that. And a happy Women's History Month to you.